Welcome to Urban American Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. The metallic sound of the automatic gate echoed through the quiet suburb of Brookhaven, Massachusetts, as Robert Miller returned from his well-deserved vacation in the Bahamas. 15 years as a master carpenter and classic car restorer had allowed him to build a comfortable life in the elegant condominium of Oak Ridge Estates. His Lexus cruised smoothly down the tree-lined street to his home at 47 Maple Drive, but something was different. Terribly different. Where his three-space garage should have been, with its iconic hand-carved oak doors, there was now a modernized facade with a shiny sign that announced Oak Ridge Community Center, where neighbors become family. Robert blinked several times, his mind refusing to process the surreal scene before his eyes. Through the large, newly installed glass windows, he could see people circulating in an environment that, 2 weeks ago, housed his 1967 Mustang in the process of being restored and his precious collection of handmade tools inherited from his grandfather. Now, round tables decorated with flowered tablecloths occupied the space, and ambient music leaked through the gaps in the windows. "Welcome back, Mr. Miller," Janet Thompson's sugary, artificial voice cut through the air like a knife. The HOA's director of social engagement, a middle-aged woman with perfectly groomed blonde hair and a hot pink blazer, approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I hope you enjoyed your vacation. We have great news about the community improvements." Robert felt his blood boil in his veins. "Janet, where are my things? What happened to my garage?" His voice shook with a mixture of anger and incredulity. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Robert." Janet dismissed his concerns with a casual gesture. "The council voted unanimously to convert your underutilized space into something that benefits the entire community. Your trinkets have been donated to a noble cause. The charity bazaar at St. Matthew's Church was extremely grateful. You voted? Without my knowledge or consent. That Mustang was an inheritance from my father." Robert advanced towards the entrance to the community center, only to be stopped by 2 hired security guards. "Mr. Miller, I need to remind you that disrupting community events will result in substantial fines," Janet warned, consulting her tablet. "By the way, since you're here, I need to discuss your monthly contribution to the upkeep of the space. We've established a modest fee of $750 per month." The situation seemed increasingly surreal. Robert watched through the windows as a group of ladies took part in a craft class, occupying the same space where, just a few days ago, his restoration project valued at over $75,000 had been. Her grandfather's vintage tools, impossible to replace, had probably already been sold for a fraction of their real value. "This is illegal, Janet. I'm going to sue you and the entire HOA board," Robert declared, his words laden with determination. "Good luck with that, dear," Janet smiled condescendingly. "Our lawyers have already reviewed all the documentation. The condo bylaws give us broad powers to make community improvements. Also, your garage was clearly in violation of Code 7.3.2 regarding improper storage of chemicals." Robert pulled out his phone and started photographing everything, including the structural modifications and the new facade. Janet immediately protested, citing the condominium's privacy policies that prohibited photographs of common areas without prior authorization. That evening, alone in his home, Robert examined old documents and contracts. He discovered that Janet Thompson had taken over as director of social engagement just 6 months before, after a contested election with very low resident turnout. Since then, the condominium's fees had increased by 40%, and several improvement projects had been implemented. A quick online search revealed a disturbing pattern. Janet Thompson had held similar positions in 3 other condominiums in the last 5 years, each marked by controversies involving misuse of funds in questionable projects. In each case, she had left before any formal investigation could be completed. Robert found an unexpected ally in Marcus Chun, his neighbor at number 43, a lawyer specializing in real estate law, who had also suffered from Janet's arbitrary actions. His Japanese garden, meticulously tended for decades, had been converted into a communal picnic area without his consent. "This isn't just about our properties, Robert," Marcus explained, as they reviewed documents in his living room. It's about stopping people like Janet Thompson from continuing to abuse their power and destroying communities under the guise of improving them. The upcoming legal battle promised to be complex and grueling. Robert knew that recovering his possessions would be virtually impossible, but he was determined to expose the HOA's illegal actions and prevent other residents from suffering the same fate. As he watched from his window the movement in the new community center that used to be his garage, Robert began to plan his strategy. The first step would be to gather other affected residents and document every violation committed by Janet's management. The second, to build a solid case with Marcus' help. And third, but not least, to ensure that Janet Thompson finally faced the consequences of her actions. The transformation of her beloved garage into a community center wasn't just a violation of property. It was a symbol of how unchecked power could corrupt even the most peaceful suburban communities. And Robert Miller was determined to restore not only his rights, but also the integrity of Oak Ridge Estates. Robert spent sleepless nights obsessively researching Janet Thompson. Each new discovery made his stomach turn. In Fairfield, Connecticut, she had turned a children's playground into an exclusive spa. In Newport, Rhode Island, she converted private gardens into paid parking lots. The pattern was always the same. She arrived with big promises, implemented radical changes, and disappeared when investigations began. The next morning, Marcus Chun organized a discreet meeting in the basement of his house. In addition to Robert, 5 other residents who had suffered from the HOA's arbitrary actions attended. Gloria Ramirez, a retired chef, lost her herb garden to a sustainable food court. Dr. Howard Bennett saw his private library converted into a community study room. All had similar stories of property usurped under the guise of the common good. What worries me is not just the illegality of the actions, Marcus explained, spreading documents out on the table. It's the sophistication of the scheme. Janet always operates within specific legal loopholes, rigging votes at strategic times when many owners are traveling. Robert noticed a pattern in the documents. All the community improvements were approved at special meetings, called with less than 48 hours' notice. Exactly, agreed Marcus. And look at the dates of the events scheduled at your community center. All the contracts were signed before your garage was even converted. Janet was already marketing his space she didn't own. Gloria, fiddling nervously with her pearl necklace, shared her discovery. My niece works in the records department at the town hall. Apparently, Janet submitted structural modification plans 3 months ago, long before Robert traveled. She planned everything meticulously. The discussion was interrupted by insistent knocks on the door. It was Patricia Watson, the HOA secretary, looking nervous and carrying a bulky briefcase. Sorry to intrude, but you need to see this, she said, quickly closing the door behind her. Patricia revealed that Janet had set up an event management company, registered in Delaware, which received all the payments for the use of the community center. The funds never go into the HOA's accounts, Patricia explained, showing bank statements. It's all channeled to shell companies. Why are you helping us? Asked Robert suspiciously. Because it's destroying our community, replied Patricia, her eyes watering. My son grew up playing in the Ramirez garden. My husband and Dr. Bennett shared books every week. This isn't about rules or property anymore. It's about preserving what makes Oak Ridge Estates special. Marcus examined the documents Patricia had brought. This is gold, he muttered. We have evidence of tax fraud, document forgery, and embezzlement. But we need to proceed with caution. Janet has powerful connections in the city council. Robert shared his own discovery. I managed to trace my Mustang. It was sold to a collector in Vermont for 1/10 of its value. The buyer had no idea the car was stolen. The group spent the next few hours working out a strategy. Dr. Bennett, with his contacts in the local media, would begin to discreetly expose the story. Gloria would use her influence in the community to rally more affected residents. Patricia would continue collecting internal evidence, while Marcus prepared legal action. We need to outsmart her, Marcus warned. Janet survived other attempts to overthrow her because she was always able to predict the moves of her opponents. That evening, on his way home, Robert noticed unusual movement in the community center. Through the windows, he saw Janet conducting a meeting with local businessmen. Her artificial smile didn't mask the greed in her eyes as she presented slides on community expansion. A shiver ran down her spine as she recognized photos of other condominium properties on the slides. The nightmare was far from over. In fact, it had barely begun. Janet planned to replicate her scheme on a large scale. In his room, Robert found an envelope with no sender. Inside were old photos of Janet in other condominiums, always next to important figures in local politics. An anonymous note read, "Be careful who you trust. She doesn't work alone." The message was clear. They were dealing with something bigger than they realized. Janet Thompson wasn't just a power-hungry HOA director. She was part of a sophisticated operation that turned quiet communities into profit-making ventures, leaving destruction and ruined lives in its wake. Robert kept the photos in his safe and sent encrypted messages to his new allies. The battle for the soul of Oak Ridge Estates was just beginning, and every move would need to be calculated with surgical precision. On the horizon, the lights of the community center shone like a distorted beacon, constantly reminding him of what he had lost and what was still at stake. The sound of laughter and music coming from his old garage echoed through the night, but Robert didn't allow himself to be consumed by anger. Instead, he channeled his energy into planning his next move. Janet Thompson had chosen the wrong opponent this time, and Oak Ridge Estates would witness a battle that would change the meaning of community property forever. The discovery of Janet's anonymous photos catalyzed a deeper investigation. Robert and Marcus devoted the entire weekend scouring public records and legal databases, revealing an intricate web of connections that extended far beyond Oak Ridge Estates. "Look at this." Marcus pointed to his laptop. Janet Thompson wasn't always Janet Thompson. I found at least 3 different aliases in the last 10 years. Jennifer Torres in San Diego, Julia Tanner in Phoenix, and now Janet Thompson. Robert studied the documents spread out on Marcus' dining table. In each city, she followed exactly the same pattern: infiltrating HOAs, turning private properties into community spaces, and suddenly disappearing when investigations began to heat up. A ring on the doorbell interrupted his analysis. It was Patricia Watson, pale and visibly upset. "You need to see this immediately," she whispered, handing over a USB stick. "I found these files on the HOA server. Janet deleted everything, but I managed to recover some backups." The files revealed a much bigger plan than they had imagined. Oak Ridge Estates was just one piece in an elaborate scheme of forced gentrification. Janet worked for a consortium of developers that aimed to turn established residential communities into lucrative commercial complexes. "She's not just an opportunist," Marcus concluded, analyzing financial spreadsheets. "She's a professional operator. Each community center serves as an anchor for future commercial expansion." My garage was just the beginning. Gloria Ramirez arrived soon after, bringing more worrying information. "My niece at City Hall found out that rezoning applications have been submitted for the entire residential area. They want to turn Oak Ridge into an entertainment district." The revelation provoked a heavy silence in the room. Robert thought of his neighbors, the families who had built their lives there, the carefully tended gardens, and the memories ingrained in each house. All this was about to be destroyed by corporate greed disguised as community progress. "We need to act fast," Dr. Bennett interjected, adjusting his glasses. "I have a contact at the Boston Globe. He can publish an investigative story, but we need hard evidence." Robert shared his own discovery. "I tracked down the buyers of my tools. Most were sold to antique dealers in different states, all connected to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands." The group established a plan of action. Marcus would begin legal proceedings for an emergency injunction. Gloria would mobilize the residents for an extraordinary assembly. Patricia would continue to monitor the HOA's internal communications. However, Janet was also on the move. That same evening, posters appeared all over the condominium announcing a major community renovation. The project promised to transform Oak Ridge Estates into a premium lifestyle destination, with exclusive boutiques, gourmet restaurants, and entertainment areas. "She's trying to sell the idea before we can expose the truth," observed Robert, tearing down one of the signs. "And from the movement in the community center, many are already buying." The situation became even more complicated when Robert received an anonymous call. "We know what you're doing, Mr. Miller. I suggest you accept the compensation offered by the HOA and move on. Not all classic car accidents can be avoided." The veiled threat only strengthened his resolve. Robert called an emergency meeting with his allies in Marcus' basement. "We need to understand who else is involved. Janet has political protection, corporate connections, and financial muscle. This goes far beyond a simple HOA dispute." Patricia brought a startling revelation. "I discovered that 3 city council members have ownership stakes in development companies linked to Janet. They've been manipulating zoning regulations for months." The battle was turning into an all-out war for the survival of Oak Ridge Estates. Each day brought new revelations about the extent of the conspiracy and new challenges for the group of residents fighting to preserve their community. Robert watched through the window as yet another event took place in his old garage. The sound of laughter and music masked the grim reality of what was really happening. A community being systematically dismantled and sold off to the highest bidder. "We can't let them turn our homes into another generic commercial development," declared Robert, his voice laden with determination. "Oak Ridge Estates is not for sale." The group silently agreed, each member aware of the risks and sacrifices required to face an adversary as powerful and well-connected as Janet Thompson. The battle for the soul of their community was just beginning, and time was not in their favor. The tension in Oak Ridge Estates reached its peak when a suspicious delivery van was caught removing documents from the HOA office in the wee hours of the morning. Robert, who had installed discreet cameras around his property, captured the entire scene. The recording showed Janet Thompson and 2 unknown men hastily loading boxes of files. "This is no coincidence," Marcus observed, analyzing the images on his laptop. "The preliminary hearing of our lawsuit is scheduled for tomorrow. They're destroying evidence." Gloria Ramirez, who kept a constant watch on the activities of the community center, brought even more disturbing news. "I found out that Janet is organizing an extraordinary assembly for tonight. They want to approve the expansion of the project to include 5 more properties, including Dr. Bennett's library." The most shocking discovery, however, came from Patricia Watson. Trembling, she showed the group a document found in a hidden folder on the HOA server. It's an internal memo from a company called Urban Renaissance LLC. It details a 5-year plan to completely transform Oak Ridge Estates into a luxury shopping complex. The document revealed that Janet wasn't just a corrupt employee. She was the architect of an elaborate forced gentrification scheme that had already been successfully implemented in 3 other states. Oak Ridge Estates was just another target in a nationwide operation. "We need to act now," Robert declared, his voice laden with urgency. "Tonight's assembly is our chance to expose everything." Marcus agreed, but warned of the risks. Janet has significant support among the newer residents. She has sold the idea that these changes will increase property values. "Also, I suspect that some votes are being bought." The group spent the next few hours preparing their strategy. Dr. Bennett finalized his dossier for the Boston Globe, including testimonials from affected residents in other communities. Gloria mobilized a network of trusted neighbors to ensure a massive presence at the assembly. Patricia organized all the evidence of financial and administrative irregularities. Robert, reviewing the security recordings, noticed something intriguing. "Look at this." He pointed to a sequence of images. "The same black BMW has appeared in front of my old garage 3 times in the last week, always after business hours." A quick check of the license plate revealed that the vehicle belonged to Charles Wellington, a prominent real estate developer known for controversial urban revitalization projects. The final link in the puzzle was beginning to form. As night approached, the tension in Oak Ridge Estates was palpable. Unknown cars drove around the condominium, and groups of residents whispered on street corners. The community center, Robert's old garage, was being prepared for the decisive assembly. Janet Thompson, impeccable in her characteristic red blazer, circulated among the arriving residents, distributing smiles and promises of a bright future for the community. Her eyes, however, betrayed concern when she noticed the massive presence of former residents. Robert and his allies positioned themselves strategically around the hall. Marcus prepared to present the legal evidence, while Gloria discreetly distributed copies of a dossier detailing the HOA's suspicious activities. Patricia, nervous but determined, kept the most incriminating documents in her purse. The assembly began with Janet presenting impressive slides of future projects. "Do you envision Oak Ridge Estates as a premium destination?" she asked rhetorically. "With exclusive boutiques, starred restaurants, and top-notch entertainment venues?" That's when Robert stood up, interrupting the presentation. "And how many of us will still be here to see that, Janet? Or should I say, Jennifer Torres?" The sound of surprise rang through the hall. Robert projected photos of Janet in her different identities, followed by reports on communities destroyed by her revitalization projects. "Oak Ridge Estates is not just a real estate investment," Robert continued, his voice firm. "It's our home. It's decades of memories, of lives built, of real community. Not this commercial farce you want to impose." Janet tried to regain control, but Marcus had already taken over the microphone, presenting evidence of the financial and administrative irregularities. Gloria and other residents began to share their stories of usurped properties and violated rights. The final blow came when Patricia revealed the Urban Renaissance LLC documents, exposing the complete gentrification plan and the connections to local politicians. Janet's face alternated between shades of red and white as she watched her scheme crumble. "This is defamation," she shouted, trying to end the meeting. Your lawyers will have a lot of work," interrupted a voice from the back of the room. It was an FBI agent, accompanied by state investigators. "Janet Thompson, you are under investigation for multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." The ensuing chaos was interrupted by the sound of tires screeching on the asphalt. Charles Wellington's black BMW was leaving the condominium in a hurry. Janet, seeing her safety net crumble, tried to follow suit, but was stopped by the agents. As Janet was escorted out, Robert looked at his old garage, now a symbol of a larger battle that had taken place, of a larger battle that had brought the community together. The fight wasn't over. There would still be legal and bureaucratic consequences to face, but Oak Ridge Estates had regained its soul. Janet Thompson's downfall set off a series of events that shook not only Oak Ridge Estates, but similar communities across the country. In the weeks following the dramatic assembly, federal investigators uncovered a much larger scheme than anyone had imagined. "We found connections to over 20 HOAs in 12 different states," explained Special Agent Catherine Morrison during a meeting with Robert and Marcus. Urban Renaissance LLC was just the tip of the iceberg.